Tea Destiny podcast. And today, our guest for the third and final time is James Magnum Cook.
Yes, I am back.
How are you doing today? Welcome.
Thank you, and sorry this interview process took us so long, but there was a lot of stuff to cover, wasn't there? Okay, so let's move forward, and you asked those questions on the return home to Bowling Green, Kentucky from Georgia in 1995. That's where we're going to start at.
All right. How'd it go? So you're home now, right?
I am home now. This follows all that negativity that you just heard on part 2, everything from the death threats to the attempt, and now I'm home. The problem is being home at this point. I have transferred home with the only job I have. I'm out of business. There's really not looking like much of a future here at this point, even though I've accomplished many things up to my life in that time. But because of all that negativity, my mindset was not quite where it needed to be. As I had talked about previously, there's a possible chance that I was drugged during part of that time. I got very sick when I first came home and stuff. But I still went to work. I was working for Applebee's, and it was the only job I had. And then I was doing stuff around my parents' house and stuff for a while. But then a very, very unique thing happened. So my dad was going to this bait and tackle store, and it was never open. So this bait and tackle store was never open enough, but he finally caught the owner there one day, and he's like, well, it'd be really nice, if this place was open, and then he worked for him for a while, and then the guy made an offer about buying it, but then, my dad really didn't want to, be the owner. Eventually, what would happen is my sister... my dad had a partner for just a few months, and then that partner didn't work out with him. My sister technically bought the partner out and then put me in place as the owner because I paid her, and then I became the owner. So less than 6 months after coming home, I owned the bait and tackle store. My dad's the manager, and we start a 10-year run of this bait and tackle store, like I said. And ironically, during this time, I would also go back into some private investigation and also process serving, which I have done for years now. I still process serve from time to time, which came out of the private investigation stuff when I came back home. So again, all of these things start going positive again. And eventually, J&F Bait and Tackle would lead to another business. So what would you like to ask me about what I just talked about right there after coming home?
Well, I don't know. There's nothing that I have to ask. You said you wanted to talk about the bait and tackle.
Yes.
And Magnum models, and your book and everything.
Okay. So real quick.
What about the bait and tackle? How long were you there? What did you do?
Okay. So I was.
What were your duties? Did you meet anybody exciting?
Yes. So let me explain how it happened with J&F Bait and Tackle. So J&F Bait and Tackle, I'm the owner for 10 years. My dad's my manager in the store, but he did a lot of the day-to-day running of operations because I was still working for another job, but I was there a lot, and then I would be there a whole lot more as I changed my schedule in order to be there during those operational hours a lot more. And at one point, I even lived over the bait and tackle store. I actually lived in the apartment over the bait and tackle store because I was the owner, and there was an apartment over the store. This is after the couple moved out that lived there that they were related to the owner next door that we would eventually buy the building from. So we were renting this building from the guy that owned the auto place next door. His name was Joe Moore, I can tell you. Everybody in this town that lives here knows all about this in that 10-year period. So anyway, eventually they move out, and I started living in the apartment, and then we started talking about buying the building. So because they'd made us an offer to buy the building, and then so we're going to own the building. So I still own the business, but what we did was me, my mom, and dad ended up owning the building together, so that worked out pretty well. And then eventually I would move out of the apartment, and then we rented the apartment, but for additional income, when things got slow. But during the months of March through October, we were usually pretty busy, but a lot of times we had a lot of what was called a pay lake business on our particular, and when those closed, we would lose a lot of business during the winter months. And then eventually I was also doing a private investigation on the side. I was doing process serving, which I did more process serving eventually for a company called Express Process out of Indianapolis. And this is all during the 10 years of the bait and tackle store. And then something we'll get to next is what happened at the end of the bait and tackle years. The last 2 years of the bait and tackle years will go into the Magnum Models years, which I am still doing, but about to make some changes. And oh, by the way, I met a lot of police officers and stuff and got really connected with the local law enforcement during those 10 years, which has been very helpful to me up here as well. That for both the things I would do going back into PI work, doing back process serving, and just making good relations with them in general. Should we go to the next phase of the return?
I wanted to know during your PI years, because you said you went back to PI, was there any cases that you did that were like awesome, exciting?
I wouldn't call any of the cases that I did awesome or exciting. Most of the stuff I did was checking up on people from fraud stuff for various companies and stuff that I got wind that I could do that under the business stuff and could do that for them. And then, of course, the process serving, as long as you're 18 years of age and don't have anything on you, you can pretty much process serve. But they do use a lot of private investigators and things for that. They prefer someone that's got some kind of knowledge of being able to find people a little easier than maybe other people can. So that's how that kind of came about, and just one thing led to another on that. And I guess during this time also, what would happen, and this will lead into our next segment, is I met someone doing some security work too, and they would eventually start pushing me and saying, "Hey, man, you used to do security work for some actors and models. You ought to get on the management side." And that's what we'll go into next.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so.
Wait a minute. So the bait and tackle shop, that was 10 years. From when to when?
1995 to 2005.
Okay, so.
And fairly successful for most of those years. I mean, one particular year, I made so much money in 1 month, I was really considering just quitting and not doing anything else. But as my dad said, with those lower months, that was probably not a good thing to do. And I would lose one job during that, but it would lead to another job because of running for constable. I did run for office for constable in 2002, but we'll get to that in a minute. That's part of the next trend of the end of the bait and tackle, and then into.
So why did you stop working for the bait and tackle?
Okay, well, the bait and tackle store started losing money in late 2002, 2003, and we were having issues with that. It just wasn't holding together, and then my job alone, my outside job wasn't supporting enough. My mom was starting to have trouble too, and we didn't know what was going on, and eventually, a few years later, we'd know that she was having Alzheimer's, because she used to do all of our taxes and various things, and it got to be very, very noticeable early on, but we didn't realize what exactly was going on until a few years later when she got a lot worse, which would be the reason I quit running for constable on the second time I would try to run. So, but we'll get to that in a minute. It's part of the bait and tackle into the Magnum Models years. So like I said, during the bait and tackle, I ran for constable in 2002. I had lost a job from 2002 to 2003, and I'd lost a job at a very unique time. So I'd lost the constable race. I didn't win the constable race. And so then what happens is I had lost this job in late 2003 and really didn't know where I was going with it. And I couldn't really support the bait and tackle store without, and so we talked about selling it at that point, but I kind of held out, trying to tell my dad, I'm going to try to hold out. Well, lo and behold, a guy that had run for a different office during that time, who had also lost a race, he ended up being he was the loss prevention supervisor, and I'm not going to name names on this one, or a company, but everybody here knows who all this is. Anyway, he called my dad one afternoon, because we'd worked some security together, and he asked him, he said if he's interested in coming and doing, work at that particular distribution center. And I just thought it was going to be a regular security job, and it turned out to be a loss prevention specialist, and then eventually I'd be a loss prevention specialist / investigator at the end. So, so I was, it was always kind of investigations, but it was more title things. But by the end, they made some changes. So that's where that leads to. And now, in April of 2004, a man that I'd worked with in security, well, he'd been bothering me for a year. A guy by the name, of course, you know who Adam is, Adam Campbell, and he'd been bugging me about these people I knew and things and security I'd done for actors and models, and he's like, you know what, you ought to get in this business, and I can make you a website and all this stuff. And he nagged me for so long. I finally gave in. I said, look, I tell you what, make the website. Do what you want to do, and we'll go from there. But I said, I'll be out of business in 90 days. Lo and behold, because I told him, I said, man, I know too much of the nasty side of this business. And I said, I just don't really think they're going to let me, do this without saying something. Well, I forgot that I had made a lot of friends with the local law enforcement and other people. So they didn't really bother me. And lo and behold, put the website up, started doing some photography. It was basically photography with a model management division. Started managing a few models. And by October of 2004, I am in New York City with one of my models at a modeling event. And I'm blown away. I'm like, I thought I'd be out of business in 90 days. And as the Magnum models years go on, more and more things just things that I couldn't, there's no way you could make up the things that happened, the weird way that it happened. It's just, and most people know this. You can look a lot of this up online. If you look at my background up, you can go, oh, well, he's connected to this, he's connected to that. So Magnum's Models, so I worked for that corporation for 18 years, by the way. I did, but during the same time, I also...
Wait, what corporation did you work for 18 years?
I don't know that I can legally name them. Although, well, I mean...
Oh, okay.
I mean, technically, I guess I can be. I guess technically I can because they're on my LinkedIn, and I guess you could find. I mean, I guess I can. Originally, it was Shop NBC, and then it eventually became Shop HQ, which Shop HQ is now owned by completely new owners that just recently bought it out, who actually owned 5 Hour Energy. That particular person just bought them out. So I guess I can tell. I just got thinking. I guess I can because it's out there. I just try to be very cautious with certain things that I say or talk about. But since I don't work for them anymore, and I mean, it's clearly known that I worked for them for like 18 years, I don't think it's a big deal. So, I mean, I'm not doing anything negative about them, obviously. So I guess if I was doing something negative about them, I guess it would be different. But I'm not saying anything negative. I have nothing negative to say about the company itself. I like the company. I like working for them. So that's not an issue. So I was with them for 18 years, but at the same time, I've got Magnum's Models during this time, starting, like I said, in April of 2004, and then eventually we added Magnum Caliber Films, which did independent films. We did a fan film, and then we did some other independent films, and then I did some crossover with other people. I met a lot of different people, had events. Like I said, I was in New York in October of the first year with a model and at an event and just blown away. And it was funny, too, because there was a little joke about the whole, because J&F Bait and Tackle, it was under the J&F Bait and Tackle banner at that time. It was owned by J&F Bait and Tackle. It wasn't an independent company. It would eventually become the independent Magnum's Models and Magnum Caliber Films. But it was so funny. Some people in New York were having such a kick out of that. The bait store, modeling company, they were having a good time at it. But I took a young lady by the name of Barbie White with me. She was 18 years old. I'm the only person her parents would trust at the time. There's some other background with true crime stuff that happened with her family. We won't go into that because I respect Barbie. I would want Barbie to be able to be on air and talk about that if we were going to talk about that from her perspective. But anyway, I was the only one they would trust anyway at that time because of my background. But he was a young lady from Morgantown, Kentucky, and we went up there. And she was so blown away about how big New York was and everything. And I think I had more of a kick out of watching her be fascinated about New York City than I did anything else. So that was kind of fun. And
can you tell the story about the two girls that got over on you about their age?
Oh, well, I don't know what I can legally tell about that because my contracts...
You don't say their name.
Yeah, my contracts were correct. I only had a contract with one of those people. And my contract, when I checked everything, when everybody else was freaking out about them, I checked my contract, and my contract, everything was correct as far as, now I didn't have an ID on this person, but this person's relative who signed with them, obviously, I looked at the dates and I'm like, well, my stuff's all legal. I didn't shoot anything that we shouldn't shoot. Yeah, there was some controversy there. She went on to become a very well-known person. We're still mutual technical acquaintance friends, kind of, but I haven't talked to her in a while. But that's really not part of my deal. A lot of that happened to a lot of other people, and it didn't really happen to me. And I've never shied away from that. There could have been
What deal? What was it?
It was a situation where there was a couple of models who were their relative. I'm not going to even say how they're related, to kind of go around. Now there's people that know this story. There's three people that know the story, and they were doing a lot of modeling stuff when they were younger, saying that they were 18 when they weren't, a lot of stuff like that. But I didn't get in any of the controversy. There was a lot of other people that were in the controversy. I avoided the controversy, luckily. And like I said, the person that was actually signed under me and was actually one of the former cover girls, actually went on to be pretty well known, still well known. But I got lucky. I got lucky that I don't know why they signed it correctly. Maybe because they knew my background as a PI. Possibly that they didn't want to take that chance that I was going to check. Lo and behold, lucky for me on that one. But that's how I kind of come to meet you, wasn't it? Something that happened on that. Well, let's just go ahead and flash forward to that real quick, because your daughter is one of my former cover girls, and I didn't want to sign her, did I? I remember talking to you and saying, after this controversy had happened with all these other people, even though I had bit the bullet, I was kind of like, I don't know that I want to sign a 16-year-old girl to be on the team or all this. And then you had explained to me how she had graduated already and a bunch of other stuff. And so then she became one of my, and by the way, she's one of my successful stories too, along with you, because she's a doctor today, and that's great stuff. So we have a lot of successful Magnum models, including your daughter. So yeah, but yeah, so there was a lot of success, but there was a little bump right there at the early stages. But I think a lot of people who had been in the business longer probably should have known better on some of the stuff. But that's their problem. That's not my problem. I got lucky, but they probably should have known better. They made some mistakes they shouldn't have made, and I'm still pretty young in the business on that side of it at that time. And I'm like, but eventually those connections worked out pretty well. So then we started making some independent films and doing that stuff. And then we moved. What
films did you do? Did you shoot them yourself?
Yeah, we shot. Well, the first one we shot. Yeah, the first one we shot was Batman: Date with Destiny. This is, of course, Adam Campbell plays the Batman character in that one when he's still working with me back in those days. And we actually filmed some stuff outside of the bait and tackle store back in the alleys. And then there's a place we were trying to get here locally. They refused, and I don't know why. I still have problems with these people here. It drives me crazy. But I've heard that other people have problems with them too, so I just kind of avoided. Let's just say it's a cave in the local area. It's not the Mammoth Cave. It's kind of in my backyard, and for me, I'm just trying to. But maybe it's because of the modeling side. I guess maybe they just thought that was too negative at the time. But the positive side, of Magnum's models. The positive side of Magnum Caliber Films was at that time, bringing a lot of attention. It would have been nice to have had it to have the back cave in a real cave, but we would eventually get to someone that was wanting the publicity. I talked to them. All I had to do for the people for that day, and this was in 2007 when we filmed that particular part. So it took us a while to get all this film done. And we filmed that part at a place called Hidden River Cave in Horse Cave, Kentucky, which I think is ironic because I was just in Horse Cave, Kentucky the other night with Rick Ryman, as you well know. So, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it's just ironic that the smaller places, they'll eat the publicity up with no problem, and yet sometimes, and I love my hometown. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But there's a few places for some particular reason. I guess they think they're big enough that they don't have to worry about little old me. I guess that's the way they look at it. Even though, if you look at all my stuff, you can see that I have a ton of different connections that doesn't have anything to do with just the modeling stuff. But I do think sometimes some people. And that's not to be just mean or negative towards them. I think they just have a bad feeling about things that has really nothing to do with what they think it does. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Okay, so but all of this leads into even more positive stuff as we go on. And so shall we move into the the crossover, the books, the various things. Okay, so as I'm doing Magnum Caliber Films along with Magnum's models, some various other things start happening. I have over 100 IMDb credits. So I think there's like 90 in the main, and then there's some, and you can find a lot of stuff in the resume part too. But I think it's over 100 total credits with various things. Everything from associate producer to executive producer to actor. I even got in my independent films. I also have stunts because we all do our own stunts. We don't have stuntmen. We are the stuntmen. So if you see an independent film, 9 times out of 10, unless they are highly, and this is well known to our industry, unless they are highly backed by someone with a lot of money that can get stuntmen, they usually are us doing the stunts. They're not stuntmen. It's very unusual unless it's connected maybe to a Hollywood independent or something like that. You might have some stuntmen involved, stunt women, depending on who's connected to that particular film. But most independent films are done by the actors. They do their own stunts. Now, if it's a very complicated stunt, it could be different. You may have to bring someone in. You may have to pay for that. But I'd say, like I said, 9 out of 10 times, if you're watching an independent film, you see a stunt in it, it was done by the actor. It's a risk. There is a risk. And I think it was something I forgot to tell you back when we were talking about things that I had wanted to do when I was in high school. Something else I'd wanted to do, I'd actually wanted to be a stuntman at one time. So it's ironic that I would do independent films and do my own stunts. So not having a stuntman, I was actually doing stuntman work when we did stunts because, well, guess what? We didn't have those. We didn't have the money for those. But this leads into a lot of different projects. I get my name on a lot of projects early on, and I did pay for some things to be, they're basically like donations in a way to have my name on people's films and then in my films, and it just added to the IMDb resume just over and over. And the weirdest thing happens is it just seems to get me more and more known for so many different things, and then people start looking at the background, people start like looking at other things, they start asking me questions about stuff, and of course in recent history we've begun interviews about everything from the good early days, the bad in between, and now into the very positive of the last 20 years. And then the last 20 years, Magnum's models, Magnum Caliber Films brought me into a ton of positive stuff. Despite what I said about someone not wanting me to film somewhere, I had very big support early on from the Bowling Green Police Department. I had a detective that was a friend of mine who I called him when we were doing the Batman film. I said, hey, what do I need to do about this? We'd like to film a scene down. And I did not have to get a permit or anything from this city. I love my city because of that. All he told me was, he said, just call the dispatch, tell them who you are, tell them I told you to call, tell them what you're doing. So this particular scene was a purse snatching scene, so there's going to be a girl screaming in this, and this was going to be filmed downtown, and it was filmed downtown. And that's all I had to do because I had these connections. I made these connections, and it was so wonderful. It wasn't like I had to get a permit. It wasn't like I had to worry about all that stuff. I mean, I told them exactly what I was doing, told them where I was going to be at. The dispatch said, hey, that's great. Thank you for letting us know. If anyone says anything or calls, we'll know. We can tell them, hey, no, we know what's going on. There's filming going on down there. It's all fine. And so that worked out really, really well. So I had built a very positive, connection with certain people that made it easier for me to do some things. Now things are a little different now, and we've grown and grown. And if you do any kind of big production, you're probably going to have to get permitted here unless you're on private property, like where we've used the ranch to film horror films and stuff like that. You know, we have a 30-acre location here in Bowling Green, Kentucky that's family owned, so it's like, you know, I can pretty much do what I want out there. Or out here, actually, because I'm the studio, the 13th Destiny podcast main headquarters is out there too. It leads into so many positive connections, and just over and over and over. And then I started doing some crossover parts, almost kind of like cameo in a way, but I do have credits for them in a couple other people's films. I even played a television minister on one that I did with a film called Cellar Secret, which is actually on Amazon. It's actually a regular horror film that you can actually rent and stuff on Amazon and watch, and I'm actually on there for a few minutes as a television evangelist, which I think is funny because they put Minister Magnum, and my dad was a minister before he died, so and I was actually using one of his Bibles, so it was kind of interesting, all these different connections to different things, and like I said, they're all positive. Now we're going to get into, I've got my name on all these films. Then I started doing some projects with Kickstarter, got my name on a bunch of other things, and got my picture in things, everything from comic books, graphic novels, to having my name on like bar stools and like microbreweries, you name it. If you look at all the Kickstarter projects, and then also some film projects on Kickstarter, which also connected me to stuff on there. And of course, I'd done something eBay with stuff I had just mentioned. So I've got all these different connections, all these different things. I'm making more and more connections and more. And then a guy by the name of Douglas Dash and me and we became friends. And he actually worked at that corporation I worked at for 18 years. And but he was already a writer. And when I first met him, he wrote fictional stuff, and I thought, well, that's not gonna, now I'll be honest, I talked to him early on about this, and what he said to me was, he said, well, let me do some research. And I said, well, I'll send you some stuff, and then you can do whatever you want to otherwise. And I sent him some stuff, and then he also did some additional research. And he came back to me. He said, you got a lot of good stuff. He said, but we will definitely do a fictionalized story around you. And I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. So I'll be the only technically real person in this book. I mean, there's like some celebrity stuff, I won't name who they are, that he mentions in there, and stuff in the fictionalized novel that he fictionalized around me. So the first one's called There's Always Strings Attached, and it's on Amazon, and so is the next one that he writes about me. So this is all getting more and more positive. So all this stuff is positive in the last 20 years for the most part. I mean, there's no real major bump except that early one. The rest of them are minor. There's no real bump. I say that it's a very, like my sister the other day, she mentioned, she said, I'm glad to hear you said that the last 20 years was mostly positive. I said it was mostly positive, and I still consider it a mostly positive time in my life.
So the name of the book, and where can they get it? Okay,
well, the first book is called There's Always Strings Attached. It's by a man by the name of Douglas Dash. That's Daech. And that one and the follow-up book to it, which is called Hindsight is 2020. They are on Amazon.com. They're independent published. One of the things, however, that I helped move a lot of these books was I'm a real person. And so what I do in 2021 after I leave the corporation, I kind of started doing it a little bit beforehand, but I was out on the road, at one point, thousands of miles, and I would meet a lot of different people. I would meet these servers and restaurants and various things, and I would sign books to them. I'd pose them, and then there was other people I would meet. I would sign with those, and I signed with a lot of people at the corporation when I first got this book. So, and one of those guys is a police officer now on Glasgow PD, and he's a friend of mine, which we actually dedicated one of the podcasts to him because he listens all the time. And so if you're listening, John, yeah, we're talking about you again. But anyway, so all these connections are there, and I will apologize if you hear that drag. I don't know what just happened there. There was a drag sounded like there was a drag on the mic. Hopefully we can get that out of there. But everything was really, really going positive, and so I went out and I started posing with these people, and more publicity went to him. And independent novels are hard to sell, but apparently there's been a lot sold of these two independent novels. And if you're interested, the IMDb actually lists Strings Attached as basically a biography of me, even though there's a lot of things that are not 100% me. But hey, the Magnum's models are in the books. Bowling Green, Kentucky's in the books. So, you know, it got a lot of publicity for me, it got a lot of publicity for the company, and it got a lot of publicity for my town. So I was happy about that. And it was all positive. These were positive as far as I'm concerned. This is very positive. And so those books, and then so Douglas does these books on me. That's pretty cool. And then, as I said, you know, I've done a lot of things with Kickstarter and stuff. We'll go into that. There was a project, you know, and I was helping them out on their project for a new album, and that was a Nashville-based band called Side Pony, who would do a limited edition song about just me. And it was okay. It was okay. I liked it. I enjoyed it. But it was very limited edition. But that will give us into what has happened in recent weeks and what is about to happen going out on all the other stuff. And so that happened. And so now I've got two books written about me, fictionalized novels around me. All the other stuff I've got is going on. So the irony is that I started the company by pressure because, you know, he was nagging me so much. Didn't think I would be in business for 90 days. And then it leads to all this other stuff that ends up being around me. And I was like, wow, I never set out originally for me to be kind of more popular than the company itself, but it's kind of as we got towards the end of this last 20 years, it's kind of what's happened. It's kind of like my name is probably known as much as the company name is known. And so the James Magnum Cook is well known. You Google that and it's just page after page after page after page, and sometimes it shocks even me that I became that well known, and that there's a lot of things pending that could possibly make me even more well known to the general public, outside of those who follow the things they've followed. Which I've got a decent following. Don't get me wrong, but there's some things pending, and now we get into a second song, which is the song you heard on part 1 and part 2 of this by Rick Ryman, which is right now it's still pending, waiting on Spotify for it to approve because there were some issues with his previous account, and now we're having to wait for them to approve the new song, but sometimes that takes up to 3 weeks anyway. We found out just in recent history, but it had been sent out to a lot of friends, including you and some other people, and of course we played it on our podcast, you know, in the last 2 weeks. Now we got that going on, and so that's putting out more to the general public. I've had a couple people talking to me about possible motion pictures on me, but they haven't, that's still pending. It hasn't moved forward of late. I was talking to Rick. I said maybe when the new song comes out on all the other stuff, maybe that'll move forward. And of course, this interview actually talking about everything from the good to the bad to the very positive of the last 20 years. Maybe it'll bring some more attention along with some other interviews that I'm doing. But yeah, I never expected to be where I'm at right now as far as the positive stuff. Look, I've had some setbacks in recent history, but the positive is beginning to outweigh the setbacks, and that's just life. Sometimes that happens. It's kind of like the podcast that I'm coming up on. Oh shoot. I forgot me from anyway their podcast. The other podcast I'm coming up on soon. That's going to be in April. They talked about me being fearless, and for the most part, I am. I guess because I faced a lot of stuff. But sometimes even the most fearless person has some things that just hits them the wrong way, the wrong day, and it's just doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, I agreed with him that for all the things I've faced that have happened to me in my life, the positive stuff does outweigh the negative, and I have mostly lived my life in fearless because I just can't live it in fear. I can't worry about what the next thing's going to happen. So that's what we talked about. So what else would you like to know about all that stuff that we just talked about? Anything particular?
Looking back on your life, what would you say to people that? What was the worst parts of it? Would you do anything differently?
Would I do anything differently? I have been asked that many times by many friends that know about the negative stuff that happened, and I think I think you can't really go back and say I would live my life differently because, and I'm going to tell you why. This has played out to be positive after all the negative. Now, if there were things that I could do, I'm looking at this as now, and thought that my life would be as positive, the positive stuff that I've had going on now, I would probably say, yes, there's a couple of things. One, the stuff that happened in Georgia. Number one, I would never get tied up with that person, including the ex-wife. That was a horrible mistake on 2 or 3 different parts there we talked about on part 2. There was some stuff previously in my younger life prior to me becoming a private investigator. I won't talk about that. There are a few people that know what happened. And I just kept, for everything that was, every time I got punched and knocked down, it's kind of like the old boxer thing. It's not about how hard you get punched, it's about how getting back up. How many times. So you just kind of keep getting back up and getting back up, and no matter what knocks you down. Those things are very good realities for someone that has been knocked down a few times. But yeah, if I thought my life would play out to the positive side, there are a couple of things I would probably do different. And especially the stuff in Georgia. For the most part, my life was positive up to that last 94, 95, and it's just, that is, like I said on part 2, it's the darkest era of my life. Now, I had some little scrapes here and there with other people over the years. And in fact, I actually had 3 death threats, which is odd. But they were probably half of them because they were drunk at the place I was doing security here. But then, of course, I've mentioned to Mindful Mutant, that's the name of this podcast, I mentioned to them, I said, I had also made comments. I said, look, I don't know that it's all just because they're drunk. It may be because of who I am and stuff. And they kind of laughed about it. I was like, well, I've had previous. And then, of course, that led to some other problems. But, so I had the previous ones in Georgia, and then I had... that was a couple years back. That was in late 2021 into 2022. Ended up having 3 at a location I was doing security. Basically, it's kind of like a casino in a way, but we won't exactly name we're not going to name that place. But that's basically what it was like. And it's just like, I'm like, whoa. The first time I had a death threat in that situation, I told them, I said, look, I've been through death threats. I really don't want to start having death threats again. And I ended up having 3 at that location. So I'm kind of like, what, when I was done with that, I was done with that. And there's no way, I don't think I'll ever work in that kind of environment again, because I don't want to go down that path again, because I've been through that. And I think unfortunately for me, in that situation that happened there with those death threats that came in like the late 2021 into 2022 at that location, it unfortunately opened all those old wounds. And that's on me. And I was just seeing all that again, and I was like, no, I got to get out. This is gonna play out badly. And eventually, it kind of did play out badly, and I don't work for them anymore, obviously. But I did go back into some other security, doing some other security work, and even for the most part, it was okay. For the most part, there were some other things, but nothing I couldn't handle. But yeah, if I were.
So what do you see in your future?
What do I see in my future? Well, of course, I'm the host of the.
It to be like,
well, that's.
And for the closing, what exactly would you want to say to your audience about your life? Things that they should watch out for, things that,
Okay, that is a very good way to close that, along with the positive. Okay, first off, don't just because I'm in the public eye, and I've been in the public eye for a long time, as you well know. Don't assume, like this is what happened in Georgia, don't assume that everything is known because she's only looking at this and like saying, oh, the papers, and be careful about the stroking of the ego. It's just unfortunate because we do kind of have these things happen when you're in the public for a long time. You're really happy to have fans, you're really happy to have supporters, and then when someone is a more friendly thing, it's really, it happens, but. Looking back at that to now, I get very cautious if it gets way over the top very early, and I go, whoa, back it up. I'm like, I've been through some stuff, and that's not going to happen, and now maybe I pushed some people away I shouldn't have, maybe that's on me, but at the same time, I don't want to go through that. And what I will say to that is, that was kind of like a living hell, and I do not want to go through that again. But I've got so many positive people in my life. But still, just be cautious. Be cautious. Be prepared. Not everything is always as it seems at the beginning. There's no shame in checking someone out. There's no, be sure you know who this person is. And when I was younger and having the background I had, I should have known better. I know a lot better now. Just be sure about the person, and if you do feel something, you don't feel something's right, then, walk away. It's better to walk away than get yourself in a situation like I did there, but my life did play out positive in the end. Not everybody's life does. I got lucky, very, very, very lucky, and very to the point that I'm very happy with the successes I had afterwards. I'm happy with the early success. I'm not happy with that negative period, but I'm very happy how it would eventually play out into so much more positive in my life than negative. My positive, for every negative I've had, I will say my positive outweighs it 3-1. Because not everybody has books written about them. Not everybody has songs written about them. Not everyone is got the background and the things that I've done, both good, negative, positive. No one person alone always has all this together. Usually you either have a very negative or very positive. You usually don't have this kind of like roller coaster adventure of a life. And I've kind of gotten to this point, which ironically, my nickname is Magnum, and of course, but from the early days. But then again, I've also been told that's one of the reasons that Douglas Dash put up, another adventure of James Magnum Cook. I've also been named a man of adventure because I've been in so many adventures. Of course, you know this personally. We talk about this. Me and Danielle talk about this all the time. About I have this adrenaline rush thing, but sometimes I kind of like to calm it down a little bit too. It's just always one thing after another. It's just like Rick said. He mentioned being lucky on the song, even though he was, putting the whole thing about the coyote story. Even though that story about the coyotes, I won't go into how that happened, but it's a story that's been going around for probably a year now, which I think it's funny that I was fighting coyotes with my hands, which I thought was funny when he put it in the song. But he's right about being lucky, and Dash is right about being adventurous, and but I don't take. There are certain chances I don't take, but I don't live my life in fear. I go out and do. And we'll close this. As you well know, and some people who follow me know, I also go out and do some adventure experiences. Sometimes I go out and fly planes with pilots on certain sites, which is awesome. I mean, FAA regulation allows you to take the controls in the air because that's how they train people too. I mean, just things like that. And some people do that too, but I mean, do that or race cars on a track. I don't speed on the road anymore after all the wrecks I survived. I'm lucky to be alive on that. I'm lucky to be alive from the people who have threatened to kill me. I'm lucky on the people who've tried to do it directly. I'm lucky on all that. And but I say, just be prepared. Be prepared. And if you want to live, a fearless life, you just got to keep living your life. Some people just go and hide and don't want to do anything. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do my thing. And if someone don't like me, they don't like me. Whatever. I got tons of people that do, and obviously I got some people that don't. And if you don't like me, that's on you. I try to like people, but some people don't let you like them. That's just the way it is. I think that's life in general, and maybe some people think I'm too over the top with the stuff I've done, and that's fine. I don't, you don't have to like me, you don't have to associate with me, but I'm going to try to treat everybody the best I can, and I'm going to try to avoid people that don't like me or try to kill me. That's kind of where I'll go with that. Just try to avoid people like that if you have any feeling they're that negative. Because I'm trying to be positive, and I've been positive. I've been 90% positive in my last 20 years. So let's try to keep it that way.
Yes. Wow. It's been quite a story over 3.
Has been quite a story, hasn't it?
Like, wow, yes.
Which Danielle.
Yeah, I appreciate being here and doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. And Danielle, of course, has known most of the story for the last 20 years because Danielle's, how long have we known each other? Probably of those 20 years?
18 years.
18 years of those 20 years. So Danielle knew most of the stories we've been talking about. Yeah, she knew most of this stuff. I talked to her about a lot of this stuff early on, but now we're talking to the audience about all of it. So yeah.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thanks for being on, James Magnum Cook.
Thank you.
Push and subscribe, please. We really, really appreciate everybody
Absolutely.
for listening. We really appreciate it.
We do.
Thank you very, very much, and we'll be talking to you next week.
Absolutely.
Bye.
I'm working on a guest for next week as I return as the host. Thank you, Danielle. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.